The little boy's body had gone limp in his sister's arms. "Please, mister." The young woman's voice cracked as she stood in the blinding snow, her frozen fingers clutching the unconscious child. "He stopped shivering an hour ago. That means he's dying." Caleb Harrington hadn't opened his door to anyone in 4 years, not since he buried his wife and baby daughter in the hillside behind his ranch. But those words, "he's dying," dragged him back from the dead. If you want to see how one desperate knock changed 2 broken souls, forever subscribe to our channel and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The snow fell like a burial shroud over Thunder Creek Ranch. Caleb Harrington stood before 2 wooden markers, his hat pressed against his chest, his breath forming clouds that disappeared into the gray February sky. 4 years to the day. 4 years since Clara's laugh had filled their kitchen. 4 years since he'd held baby Lily for the first and last time. "Brought your favorite Clara." He placed a single wild prairie rose on her grave. The bloom looked fragile against the frozen earth. Stubborn little thing had been growing in a sheltered spot near the south ridge, defying winter itself. Clara had been like that. Stubborn, beautiful, gone. His fingers trembled as he touched the smaller marker. Lily Harrington. Born and died, February 14th, 1879. "The new foals are strong this year," he said, his voice rough. "Sold 3 to the cavalry last month. Good money." The wind picked up, driving snow sideways into his face. I know. Time to go." But he didn't move. Couldn't. Because going back meant returning to that empty house, to those silent rooms, to the nursery he hadn't opened since the funeral. "I'm sorry I wasn't there, Clara." The words came out broken. "I'm sorry I was chasing those damn horse thieves while you needed me." He'd said it 1,000 times. It never got easier. The ride back took longer than usual. The storm had come early, catching him on the high ridge where the wind cut like a knife. By the time the main house came into view, Caleb could barely see Thunder through the driving snow. Zeke Waters met him at the barn door, lantern held high. At 68, the old foreman moved, careful but steady. "Storm's bad," Zeke said, taking Thunder's reins. "Worse than they predicted." "I noticed." Caleb dismounted stiffly, his bones aching from the cold. "Ruth left stew warming. Said you'd need it after—" Zeke paused. "After visiting." Caleb nodded. Zeke never pushed. That's why he was the only person Caleb had kept close these 4 years. Inside, the warmth hit him like a wall. Ruth's beef stew filled the kitchen with a smell that should have been comforting. Instead, it just reminded him of all the meals he ate alone. He was spooning stew into a bowl when Zeke came in, stomping snow from his boots. "Gonna be snowed in a few days," Zeke said, settling by the fire. "Maybe longer." Caleb grunted acknowledgement. "You speak to her today? To Clara?" "Told her about the foals." Zeke nodded slowly. "She always did love those horses. Remember how she'd spend hours in the barn with that first mare you bought her? Starlight." Caleb's voice softened despite himself. "Clara said she was too wild to tame. And you said, nothing's too wild if you're patient enough." Caleb set down his bowl. "I was wrong about that." "Were you?" Caleb didn't answer. Some things couldn't be tamed. Grief, guilt, the voice in his head that whispered, "Your fault, your fault, your fault," every time he closed his eyes. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows like something trying to get in. "I'll check the horses before turning in," Zeke said, rising with a grunt. "Make sure everything's secured." After Zeke left, Caleb remained by the fire, staring at the flames. His gaze drifted to the closed door at the end of the hallway. Lily's room. The walls were painted yellow because Clara insisted their daughter would bring sunshine into their lives. The door hadn't been opened in 4 years. He was heading to his own room when he heard it. A sound so unexpected it froze him mid-step. Knocking. Not at the front door, but at the barn. Caleb frowned. Who the hell would be out in this weather? He grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace, pulled on his coat, and stepped into the storm. The cold hit him like a fist. Snow drove into his face, blinding, stinging. He made his way to the barn by memory alone, the lantern in his hand creating a small sphere of light in the white darkness. The knocking came again. Desperate now, frantic. Caleb raised his rifle with one hand, lifted the lantern with the other, and yanked open the barn door. A young woman stood in the doorway. She was maybe 23, 24. Dark auburn hair plastered to her face with snow. Gray-green eyes that burned with determination, despite the blue tinge to her lips. Behind her, clutching her skirts, was a little girl of about 7. And in her arms, Caleb's breath stopped. A small boy, maybe 5 years old, hung limp in her grip. His face was pale as milk. His lips were blue. His feet were wrapped in what looked like burlap sacking instead of shoes. "Please, mister," the woman's voice cracked. "He stopped shivering an hour ago. That means he's dying." Caleb knew she was right. He'd seen it during the war. When a body stopped fighting the cold, it meant the cold had won. "Inside," he heard himself say. "Now." He stepped back, holding the door wider. The woman didn't hesitate. She pushed past him with the little girl heading straight for the nearest hay bale. "No." Caleb grabbed her arm. "House. The barn's not warm enough." "Mister, I don't—" "House. Now. Move." Something in his voice must have convinced her. She nodded once and followed him into the storm. The distance to the house was maybe 50 yards. It felt like miles. Zeke met them at the door, his eyes widening at the sight of the strangers. "The boy's hypothermic," Caleb said shortly. "Get blankets. Warm water. Ruth's medical kit." Ruth went to town before the storm. "Then get whatever we have. Go." Zeke moved faster than Caleb had seen him move in years. The woman stood just inside the door, dripping snow onto the floor, the unconscious boy still clutched in her arms. The little girl pressed against her side, silent and watchful. "Give him to me," Caleb said. The woman's arms tightened instinctively. "I can give him to me." Their eyes met. Something passed between them, a recognition of desperation perhaps, or shared understanding that this moment was life or death. She handed over the boy. He weighed almost nothing. Caleb carried him to the fire, laying him on the rug before the hearth. The child's skin was cold as marble. His breathing was shallow, barely there. "What's his name?" "Samuel. Sammy." The woman knelt beside him, her frozen fingers fumbling with his wet clothes. "Please, he's all I have left. Him and Emma. They're all I have. Help me get these wet things off him." They worked together in grim silence, stripping the boy down to his underthings. Caleb wrapped him in the blankets Zeke brought, then positioned him close to the fire, close, but not too close. Warming a frozen body too fast could kill it. "The feet," Caleb said. "Those rags have to come off." The woman she'd said the children were all she had, so she wasn't their mother, unwrapped the burlap from Sammy's feet. Caleb's jaw tightened. The boy's feet were raw, blistered, some toes already showing the white patches of frostbite. "Where are his shoes?" The woman didn't meet his eyes. "We had to sell them, 3 days ago, for bread." Caleb absorbed this in silence. Sold a child's shoes in February, in Wyoming. Things had to be beyond desperate for that. "Emma." The woman turned to the little girl who stood watching with 2 old eyes. "Come here, sweetheart. Let's get you warm too." The girl moved to her sister's side. Sister Caleb decided they had the same jaw, the same gray-green eyes, and allowed herself to be wrapped in a blanket. Unlike Sammy, she seemed merely cold rather than dying. But there was something in her silence that troubled Caleb. Children that age should be crying, asking questions, making noise. Emma made no sound at all. "Zeke," Caleb said without turning, "heat some broth, and find whatever clothes we have that might fit them." "On it, boss." Zeke's footsteps retreated toward the kitchen. For several long minutes no one spoke. Caleb watched Sammy's face for any sign of returning color. The woman never took her eyes off the boy, her hands constantly moving, adjusting blankets, checking his pulse, stroking his hair. "He's not shivering," she whispered. "Why isn't he shivering?" "Give it time." The cold went deep. "If he dies..." Her voice broke. "If he dies, it's my fault. I should have found better shelter. I should have..." "He's not going to die." She looked at him, then really looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. "How do you know?" "Because I won't let him." The words came out harder than he intended, carrying a weight of emotion he hadn't felt in years. This boy wasn't going to die in his house. Not tonight. Not while Caleb had breath in his body. The woman studied his face in the firelight. Whatever she saw there seemed to steady her. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for taking us in. Most wouldn't have. Not strangers. Not in a storm like this. Most aren't snowed in alone on a ranch with nothing but horses and ghosts for company." The words slipped out before he could stop them. The woman's expression flickered curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of shared pain. Before she could respond, Sammy stirred. A small moan escaped his blue-tinged lips. His eyelids fluttered. "Sammy." The woman leaned close, her voice trembling. "Sammy, can you hear me?" The boy's eyes opened, unfocused, confused. Miss Maggie." "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." "I'm cold." I know you are, but you're safe now. We're going to get you warm." Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. The boy was shivering now, small tremors running through his thin frame. That was good. That meant his body was fighting again. "What's your name?" "Son." Sammy's eyes drifted to Caleb. Despite his exhaustion, despite the cold that still gripped him, the boy studied Caleb with an intensity that was almost unnerving. "Samuel Sinclair, sir, but everyone calls me Sammy. I'm Caleb Harrington. This is my ranch." "Is this heaven?" The question caught Caleb off guard. "What?" "The pretty lady said we'd find heaven when we needed it most." Sammy's voice was dreamy, his eyes still unfocused. "She said a man with sad eyes would open the door." Miss Maggie, the woman, shot Caleb an apologetic look. "He gets confused when he's tired, makes up stories." "Don't make it up," Sammy mumbled. "She sings to me, the lady with yellow hair. She sings about sunshine and flowers." Caleb went very still. "What does she sing, Sammy?" "Dunno the words exactly, but it goes like..." The boy began to hum. The melody was soft, broken by chattering teeth, but Caleb recognized it immediately. Every note, every rise and fall, because it wasn't a hymn or a folk song or anything that had ever been published. It was Clara's lullaby, the one she had made up herself during her pregnancy. The one she sang only in the privacy of their bedroom, her hand on her swelling belly. The one Caleb had never heard anywhere else in his 42 years of life. "Where did you learn that song?" His voice came out hoarse. Sammy's eyes had closed again. "Told you. The pretty lady." "What pretty lady? Where did you meet her?" But Sammy had drifted off his shivering body, finally surrendering to exhaustion. Caleb stared at the sleeping child, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Mr. Harrington?" Miss Maggie's voice was uncertain. "Are you all right?" He wasn't. He was the furthest thing from all right. That song. That specific melody. How could a stranger's child know it? "I'm fine." He managed. "Just tired. It's been a long day." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. "I should explain who we are. Why we're here. Tomorrow, you need rest." "But..." "Tomorrow." Caleb rose, his legs unsteady. Zeke will show you to a room. There's a bed for the children and a cot for you. We'll talk in the morning." Miss Maggie opened her mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Thank you, Mr. Harrington. I don't know how to repay—" "Don't thank me yet. Don't know what you're running from. Don't know what kind of trouble you might bring to my door." Her face went pale. "How did you know we were running?" "Burlap on a child's feet in February. No supplies, no horses. Middle of nowhere in the worst storm of the year." He met her eyes. "That's not traveling, ma'am. That's fleeing." For a long moment, she didn't speak. When she did, her voice was barely a whisper. "His name is Victor Crane. He's a businessman from Silver Falls. He says the children belong to him now." "And do they—" "Over my dead body." The ferocity in her voice surprised him. This wasn't a woman playing victim. This was a woman who'd fight to her last breath for those children. "Then we'll make sure it doesn't come to that," Caleb heard himself say. "Get some rest, Miss Sinclair. We'll talk tomorrow." "Maggie," she said. "My name is Maggie." He nodded once. "Maggie, sleep well." But as she gathered Emma and followed Zeke toward the spare room, as she paused at the doorway to look back at him with those gray-green eyes full of questions, Caleb knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. Because somewhere in the howling storm, fate had knocked on his door. And when he opened it, he found not just 3 frozen strangers. He found Clara's lullaby on a dying child's lips. Later that night, Caleb sat alone by the fire, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. The house had gone quiet. Zeke had retired to his quarters in the back. The strangers were settled in the spare room, their first warm sleep in God knew how long. But Caleb couldn't rest. That song. That goddamn song. He rose and walked to the hallway, stopping before the yellow door he hadn't opened in 4 years. His hand hovered over the knob. His heart hammered in his chest. Just open it. Just look. He couldn't. He'd buried Clara and Lily on the same day. Watched them lowered into the frozen ground while snow fell softly from a gray sky. And then he'd come home, closed this door, and never opened it again. Because opening it meant accepting they were gone. Opening it meant letting go. The pretty lady said we'd find heaven when we needed it most. What if Sammy wasn't confused? What if— Stop it? Caleb pressed his forehead against the cold wood of the door. Clara's dead. Lily's dead. Lily's. They're not sending messages through a stranger's child. But even as he thought it, doubt whispered in his ear. Then, how does he know the song? A small sound behind him made Caleb spin around. Emma stood at the end of the hallway, wrapped in an oversized shirt that hung past her knees. Her dark hair was tangled, her eyes watchful. "You're supposed to be sleeping," Caleb said. "Can't sleep." Her voice was barely audible. "New places are scary." Caleb felt something shift in his chest. When was the last time he'd spoken to a child? 4 years no longer. Clara had been the one who connected with children. Caleb never knew what to say to them. "Yeah," he said finally. "I reckon they are." Emma took a hesitant step closer. "Miss Maggie says you're a good man. She doesn't know me. She knows people. She's smart. Papa always said." Emma stopped abruptly, her face closing like a door slamming shut. "What did your papa say?" "Nothing." Emma's voice went flat. "Papa's dead." The words hit Caleb harder than they should have. He'd lost his own father young, thrown from a horse when Caleb was 12. The pain of it still lived somewhere deep in his chest. "I'm sorry, Emma." She studied him with those 2 old eyes. "Sammy says a lady talks to him in his dreams. He says she has yellow hair and a baby." Caleb's throat tightened. "Does he now?" "I don't believe in ghosts." Emma's chin lifted stubbornly. "Ghosts aren't real." "Maybe not. But Sammy knew things. About the storm coming early. About which direction to walk." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. He said the lady told him there was a house with a sad man who needed us as much as we needed him. Caleb couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Are you the sad man, Mr. Harrington? He looked at this little girl, this child who'd lost her father, who'd walked through a blizzard with frozen feet, who'd nearly watched her brother die, and felt something crack open in his chest. Yeah, Emma, I reckon I am. She nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected. That's okay, she said. We're sad too. And then to Caleb's utter shock, she crossed the remaining distance between them and took his hand. Her small fingers were warm now, finally warm, and they wrapped around his calloused palm like it was the most natural thing in the world. The yellow door, Emma said, looking past him. What's behind it? Caleb's voice came out rough. Something I lost. Someone I lost. A long time ago. Does it hurt to remember? Every day. Emma squeezed his hand. Miss Maggie says remembering is how we keep people alive, even when they're gone. They stood there in the quiet hallway, a broken man and a grieving child, both holding on to something neither could name. Finally, Emma yawned a real yawn, the kind that meant sleep was finally winning. I should take you back to bed, Caleb said. Will you still be here in the morning? You won't make us leave. I'll be here, and no one's leaving until this storm passes, maybe not even then. Promise. Caleb looked down at her small, trusting face. He thought of the dangers that might follow these strangers to his door. He thought of Victor Crane and whatever evil had driven them into a blizzard with nothing but hope and prayers. He thought of Clara's lullaby on a dying boy's lips. Promise, he said. Emma's smile was small but real, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. Okay, Mr. Harrington. Caleb, he heard himself say. You can call me Caleb. Okay, Mr. Caleb. He walked her back to the spare room where Maggie sat awake on the cot, her face tight with worry that melted into relief when she saw Emma. She couldn't sleep, Caleb explained quietly. I found her in the hallway. Maggie gathered Emma against her side. Emma, you can't wander in the night. This isn't our house. It's okay. Emma snuggled into her sister. Mr. Caleb said we could stay. He promised. Maggie's eyes met Caleb's over Emma's head. There was gratitude there, but also wariness. She didn't quite trust him yet. He couldn't blame her. She had no reason to trust any man. Thank you, Maggie whispered, for everything. Caleb nodded and turned to go, but at the door he paused. Miss Maggie. Yes. That man you mentioned, Victor Crane. If he comes looking for you, I need to know what we're dealing with. Her face went pale. Tomorrow. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. Fair enough. He hesitated. But I want you to know something. Whatever he is, whatever he's done, he won't get those children. Not while I have breath in my body. Something flickered in Maggie's eyes. Surprise, hope, the first fragile tendrils of trust. Why? She asked. You don't know us. You don't owe us anything. Caleb thought of Clara's lullaby, of Emma's hand in his, of a little boy who'd nearly died on his doorstep, asking if this was heaven. Maybe not, he said, but I'm starting to think you were meant to knock on my door tonight, and I'm not the kind of man who ignores what's meant to be. He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Back in the main room, he stood before the dying fire, watching the embers glow. The pretty lady said a man with sad eyes would open the door. Caleb didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in signs from beyond, but he believed in Clara's love, believed it was strong enough to survive death itself. What if she'd sent them? What if this was her final gift? I don't know what you're doing, Clara, he whispered to the empty room. But I trust you. I always trusted you. Outside, the storm raged on. The wind screamed around the corners of the house. Snow piled higher against the windows. But inside, something was changing. The walls that Caleb had built around his heart walls of grief and guilt and isolation were beginning to crack, and through those cracks, light was starting to creep in. Morning came gray and quiet, the storm having blown itself out some time before dawn. Caleb woke in the chair by the fire, his neck stiff, his back aching, but his mind sharp with the memory of everything that had happened. The lullaby, the children, Maggie's fierce gray-green eyes. He rose and moved to the kitchen, starting coffee out of habit. The house was still silent, his guests exhausted from their ordeal. Good. They needed rest. Zeke appeared at the back door, stamping snow from his boots. Drifts are waist-high in some places. We ain't going nowhere for a few days at least. The horses. Fed and watered, all accounted for. Zeke poured himself coffee, his weathered face thoughtful. That boy, the little one, he gonna be all right? Think so. He was shivering when he fell asleep. That's a good sign. Zeke nodded slowly. Caleb, I don't mean to pry, but last night when that child was humming that song, Caleb's hand tightened on his cup. You heard it. I heard it, and I recognized it. Zeke's faded blue eyes met Caleb's. That was Miss Clara's song. The one she used to sing when she thought no one was listening. I know. How's that possible? How does a stranger's child know a song that only existed in this house? Caleb set down his coffee. I don't have an answer for that, Zeke. I've been asking myself the same question all night. You think maybe... Zeke hesitated. You think maybe Miss Clara sent them? The question hung in the air between them. Two practical men ranchers who dealt in horses and hay and hard work, standing in a kitchen, talking about messages from the dead. I don't know what I think, Caleb admitted, but I know those children nearly died last night. I know that woman is running from something bad, and I know Clara would have wanted me to help them. Zeke nodded slowly. Then that's what we do. A small sound from the hallway made them both turn. Sammy stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket 3 times his size, his color much improved from the night before. I'm hungry, he announced. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest at the sight of the boy standing alert, alive. How are your feet? Sammy looked down at his bandaged toes. They hurt. But Miss Maggie says hurting is good. Means they ain't dead. She's right about that. Caleb moved to the stove. You like eggs, Sammy? Yes, sir. And bacon if you got it. I got it. Sammy shuffled to the table, climbing onto a chair with some difficulty. His feet were clearly painful, but he didn't complain. Tough kid. Mr. Caleb? Yeah. Thank you for saving me last night. Miss Maggie said I almost died. Caleb cracked eggs into the pan, not turning around. You're welcome, Sammy. The pretty lady said you would save me. She said you have a good heart, even though it's broken. Caleb's hand stilled over the stove. The pretty lady talks to you a lot, does she? Mostly in dreams, but sometimes when I'm awake too. Sammy's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather. She started talking to me after Papa died. Miss Maggie thinks I make her up, but I don't. Caleb turned to face the boy. In the morning light, Sammy looked painfully young. Thin face, dark hair sticking up in all directions, eyes too big for his head. But those eyes held something ancient, something knowing. What does she look like, this lady? Yellow hair like sunshine, blue eyes, really pretty smile. Sammy tilted his head. She has a baby with her sometimes, a little girl baby. Caleb's throat closed up. She says the baby's name is Lily, like the flower. The eggs started to burn. Caleb didn't move. Couldn't move. Mr. Caleb, the eggs. Zeke stepped in, removing the pan from the heat with practiced ease. I'll handle breakfast, boss. Why don't you go get some air? Caleb stumbled toward the door, not seeing where he was going, barely feeling the cold as he stepped onto the porch. His lungs wouldn't work. His heart was pounding so hard, he thought it might burst. Lily. The boy had said Lily. He'd never told anyone the baby's name, not even Zeke. Clara had chosen it in the final weeks of her pregnancy, whispering it to Caleb in the darkness of their bedroom. It had been their secret, their hope. And now a stranger's child was speaking it as if it were common knowledge. "Mr. Harrington." Maggie's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her standing in the doorway, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders, her face lined with concern. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," he heard himself say. She stepped closer, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold. "Sammy said something, didn't he, about the lady?" "He told you about her." "He's been talking about her since our father died." "I thought it was his way of coping with the grief. An imaginary friend." Maggie hesitated. "But lately the things he says, they're too specific to be imagination." "He knew my daughter's name. My daughter who died before she was an hour old. A name I never told anyone." Maggie's face went pale. "That's impossible." "That's what I thought." They stood in silence, the cold morning air swirling around them. Finally Maggie spoke. "My mother believed in such things. She used to say the veil between worlds was thin in times of great need, that our loved ones watch over us." She paused. "I never believed her. But after Papa died, after everything that happened, I don't know what I believe anymore." "Your father, what happened to him?" Maggie's expression shuddered. "That's a long story. We're snowed in for days. I've got nothing but time." She studied him for a long moment, weighing something in her mind. Then she nodded slowly. "Let me check on the children first. Make sure they've eaten. Then I'll tell you everything." An hour later, with Sammy and Emma settled by the fire with bowls of oatmeal and Zeke's gentle supervision, Maggie sat across from Caleb at the kitchen table. Her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. "My father was a farmer," she began. "Good land near a town called Millbrook in Missouri. After Mama died of consumption last winter, Papa struggled. The crops failed. He needed money. So he borrowed. From Victor Crane. A businessman, Papa called him. Respectable. Wealthy." Maggie's voice hardened. "A snake in a fine suit." "What were the terms?" "Crushing. 50% interest compounded monthly. Papa didn't understand what he was signing. He was a farmer, not a scholar. He thought he could pay it back with the next harvest. But the harvest didn't come. No. Drought. Then locusts. Then Crane came calling." Maggie's hands tightened on the cup. "He offered Papa a deal. Forgiveness of the debt in exchange for... For what?" She met his eyes. "Me." Caleb felt cold fury settle in his gut. "He wanted to buy you. Marry me, he called it. But yes, buy. Like livestock." Maggie's voice was flat. "Papa refused. Told Crane he'd find another way. So Crane found another way first." "What do you mean?" "He had papers drawn up. Said if Papa couldn't pay his children would become wards of the territory. Crane would assume guardianship." Maggie's jaw tightened. "Papa went to a lawyer. Tried to fight it. But the lawyer was in Crane's pocket. So was the sheriff. So was the judge. Christ." One night Papa confronted Crane. Told him he'd found evidence that Crane had forged Papa's signature on the guardianship papers. Maggie paused. "That night some of Crane's men came to our farm." Caleb waited, knowing what was coming. "They beat him. Badly. Left him in the barn." Maggie's voice broke slightly before she controlled it. "He died 2 days later. Never woke up." "Maggie?" "They called it a farming accident. Said he fell from the hayloft. But Sammy saw. He was hiding in the rafters when it happened. He saw everything." Caleb thought of the little boy by the fire, 5 years old, watching his father being beaten to death. That's why Crane wants him, Caleb realized. Sammy's a witness. The only witness. Emma was inside with me. But Sammy... Maggie's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "He has nightmares, screams in his sleep, but he won't tell anyone what he saw. I think he's afraid that if he says it out loud, Crane will come for him. Crane's already coming for him. I know. That's why we ran. Maggie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I waited until dark, packed what we could carry, and we walked. For 3 days, selling everything we could for food and shelter, until we had nothing left to sell. No one helped you. Some did. A farmer's wife gave us bread. A preacher let us sleep in his church. Maggie's voice turned bitter. But most just turned away. A woman alone with 2 children running from a wealthy man, they didn't want to get involved. Caleb thought of all the doors that must have closed in her face, all the time she'd begged for help and been refused. And still, she'd kept going. Still, she'd kept those children alive. You're a hell of a woman, Maggie Sinclair. She looked up surprised. Most people would have given up. Most people would have taken Crane's deal just to survive. But you didn't. I couldn't. Her voice was fierce. Crane killed my father. He'd kill those children too eventually, once they were no longer useful. I couldn't let that happen, no matter what. And you came all the way to Wyoming. I heard there were ranches out here, remote places where a woman might find work. She laughed bitterly. I didn't count on nearly killing my brother in a blizzard. You didn't nearly kill him. The storm did, and you saved him by finding this place. The lady saved him. Sammy's voice came from the doorway. Caleb and Maggie both turned to find the boy watching them with those ancient eyes. She told me which way to walk. She said there was a house with a sad man who needed us. Sammy, Maggie said carefully. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. The boy limped into the kitchen, his bandaged feet making soft sounds on the wooden floor. Miss Maggie, you told Mr. Caleb about the bad man. Maggie hesitated. Yes, honey, I told him. Good. Sammy climbed onto a chair, wincing at the pain in his feet. Mr. Caleb will protect us. The lady said so. Caleb looked at this child, this small boy, who'd witnessed his father's murder, who'd nearly died in a blizzard, who spoke of dead women and supernatural guidance as casually as other children discussed their toys. Sammy, he said slowly. The lady who talks to you. Does she know who I am? Of course. Sammy smiled, the first genuine smile Caleb had seen from him. She says you're the man she loved in the world. She says she's sorry she had to leave you. But she says it's time for you to stop being sad now. Caleb couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She says the door should be opened. The yellow door. She says there's something behind it you need to see. Sammy, Maggie said gently, maybe we shouldn't. It's all right. Caleb's voice came out hoarse. He's not saying anything that isn't true. He stood his chair scraping against the floor. The yellow door. For 4 years he'd avoided it. For 4 years he'd told himself he wasn't ready. Maybe he never would be ready. Maybe that was the point. I'll be back, he said, and walked out of the kitchen before anyone could respond. The hallway felt longer than usual. Each step toward the yellow door was a step toward pain he'd spent years avoiding. But Sammy's words echoed in his head. She says it's time for you to stop being sad now. Clara would say that. It was exactly the kind of thing she would say. Caleb reached the door. His hand trembled as he touched the knob. Cool metal against his palm. The last barrier between him and everything he'd lost. He turned the knob and pushed. The room was exactly as he remembered. Yellow walls, white crib. The quilt Clara had stitched embroidered with butterflies and flowers. The wooden rocking horse he'd carved, standing patient by the window. Dust covered everything, a thick gray layer of time and neglect. But there was something else, something he hadn't expected. On the small dresser beside the crib sat a music box. The music box he'd given Clara on their 10th anniversary. He remembered placing it there the day he finished the nursery, wanting it to be the first thing Clara saw when she brought the baby home. She'd never seen it. She'd died before she could. Caleb crossed the room on unsteady legs and picked up the music box. His fingers left tracks in the dust on its surface. He opened the lid. The melody that emerged was soft tinkling, achingly familiar. Clara's lullaby. The tune she'd created for a baby she'd never hold. The same tune Sammy had been humming last night. Caleb sank into the rocking chair beside the crib. The music box clutched in his hands. For the first time in 4 years, he wept. Not the silent tears he sometimes shed at Clara's grave. Real weeping. The kind that racked his body and stole his breath. The kind that was equal parts grief and relief. He wept for Clara, for Lily, for all the years he'd wasted hiding from his own heart. And somewhere, somehow, he could have sworn he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder, a whisper of warmth in the cold room. "It's all right, Caleb. Let them in. Let them heal you." When the tears finally stopped, Caleb sat in the silence of the nursery, the music box still in his hands. The melody had wound down, but he could still hear it in his memory. A soft knock at the door made him turn. Emma stood in the doorway, her solemn face uncertain. "Mr. Caleb? Are you okay?" He wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Yeah, Emma, I'm okay." She took a hesitant step into the room, her eyes moving over the crib, the rocking horse, the dusty toys. "Is this the room you lost?" she asked quietly. "Yeah. This is Lily's room, my daughter." Emma moved to the rocking horse, her small hand touching its mane. "It's pretty. Sad but pretty. Like a lot of things in life." She turned to face him, her gray-green eyes so like Maggie's, full of a wisdom no 7-year-old should possess. "My papa used to say that sad things can become happy things if you let them." She paused. "He said grief is just love with nowhere to go." Caleb stared at her. "Your papa was a smart man." "He was. Before the bad man killed him." Emma's voice was flat matter-of-fact. "Sammy doesn't like to talk about it, but I remember everything." "Emma, Miss Maggie doesn't know this, but I drew a picture of what I saw from the window that night. The men, their faces." She met Caleb's eyes. "I hid it in my dress. I still have it." Caleb went very still. "You saw the men who hurt your father." "3 of them. I drew them so I wouldn't forget." Her small jaw tightened. "I want them to pay for what they did." "Emma, that's dangerous. If Crane knew you had that picture." "I know. That's why I haven't told Miss Maggie." Emma's eyes searched his face. "But I'm telling you, because Sammy says the pretty lady trusts you, and I trust Sammy." Caleb set down the music box and knelt before the little girl. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. That picture could be important. It could help put the men who hurt your father in jail, but it could also put you in danger." "I'm already in danger. We all are." "I know, but I'm going to change that." Caleb took her small hands in his. "I'm going to keep you safe. You and Sammy and Miss Maggie. I promise." "Why?" Emma asked. "You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." The same question Maggie had asked. The same doubt in the same gray-green eyes. "Because sometimes the right thing and the hard thing are the same thing," Caleb said. "And because I think you were meant to find me. I think maybe someone sent you here to help me as much as I'm going to help you." Emma considered this. "The pretty lady. Maybe. I don't know, but I know I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Any of you." For a long moment, Emma just looked at him. Then slowly she leaned forward and hugged him. Caleb froze. He couldn't remember the last time a child had hugged him. The sensation was overwhelming, her small arms around his neck, her warmth against his chest, the absolute trust in the gesture. His arms came up slowly, carefully wrapping around her thin shoulders. "Thank you, Mr. Caleb," Emma whispered. "You're welcome, Emma." When they returned to the main room, Maggie was pacing by the fire, her face tight with worry. Emma, I told you not to wander off. It's okay, Miss Maggie. Emma crossed to her sister's side. Mr. Caleb was showing me the pretty room, the one with the horse. Maggie's eyes met Caleb's over Emma's head. He could see the questions there, the concern. We were just talking, Caleb said, getting to know each other. Maggie opened her mouth to press further, but Zeke chose that moment to enter from the back door, his face grim. We got a problem, boss. What kind of problem? Rode out to check the road. There's a group of men camped about 3 miles east, 7, maybe 8 of them. Professional looking, armed. Caleb felt Maggie go rigid beside him. Crane? Can't say for sure, but they ain't local, and they ain't passing through, not in this weather. Zeke's faded eyes moved to Maggie. They're waiting for something, or someone. He found us. Maggie's voice was barely a whisper. Oh God, he found us? We don't know that for sure, Caleb said. Could be cattle rustlers, could be travelers waiting out the weather. Or it could be Victor Crane come to take my children. Maggie grabbed Emma, pulling her close. We have to leave, now. And go where the roads are impassable. Even if they weren't 8 armed men, would catch you before you got 5 miles. Then what do you suggest? Maggie's voice rose with panic. That I just wait here for him to come take everything I have left. I suggest you calm down and let me think. Calm down, calm down. You don't understand what he'll do. You don't understand. I understand plenty. Caleb's voice cut through her panic like a blade. I understand a murderer is out there, and innocent children are in here. I understand running won't save you, and fighting alone won't either. Then what will? Witnesses, evidence, the law. The law is in Crane's pocket. Not all of it. Not out here. Caleb moved to the window, looking out at the white expanse of snow. There's a territorial judge in Cheyenne. Nathaniel Cole. Honest man, not connected to anyone in Silver Falls. If we can get evidence to him. What evidence? It's my word against Crane's. My word against a wealthy businessman who owns half of Missouri. Emma saw the men that night. She drew their faces. Maggie spun toward her sister. What? Emma pulled away from Maggie, reaching into the hidden pocket of her dress. Her small hand emerged with a folded piece of paper, worn at the edges but intact. I drew them so I wouldn't forget, so they couldn't get away with it. Maggie took the paper with trembling hands, unfolded it slowly. The drawing was crude, a child's work, but the faces were distinct. 3 men each rendered with surprising detail. One with a scar across his cheek, one with a crooked nose, one with small, mean eyes. Emma, Maggie breathed. Why didn't you tell me? I was scared. I thought if the bad man knew he'd hurt you too. Oh, sweetheart. Maggie pulled Emma into a fierce embrace. You brave, brave girl. Caleb studied the drawing over Maggie's shoulder. These men. If they're Crane's hired muscle, someone might recognize them. A judge, a sheriff with no connection to Crane. This could be enough to start an investigation. Could be, Maggie repeated. But what if it's not? What if Crane buys his way out of it like he always does? Then we'll find another way. But we won't find any way if we panic and run. Maggie closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, the panic had retreated, replaced by something harder. Determination. All right, she said. We stay. We fight. We fight, Caleb agreed. But first we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Zeke, can you get closer to that camp? Find out who they are. Can try. I know these hills better than any outsider. Be careful. If they're Crane's men, they'll be watching for scouts. I ain't survived 68 years by being careless. Zeke grabbed his coat and hat. I'll be back before nightfall. After he left, Caleb turned to find Maggie staring at him with an unreadable expression. You're risking a lot for strangers, she said quietly. If Crane finds out you're sheltering us, then he'll find out. I'm done hiding Maggie. Done living half a life because I'm afraid of losing what's left. He met her eyes. Your brother told me something this morning. He said Clara, the lady in his dreams, told him I need to stop being sad, that I need to let people in again. And you believe him? I believe something brought you to my door last night. Call it fate. Call it God. Call it a dead woman's ghost looking out for her husband. Caleb shook his head. I don't know what to call it, but I know it's real, and I'm not going to waste it by being afraid. Maggie's eyes glistened. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just trust me. Can you do that? She looked at him, this man she'd known less than a day, this stranger who'd taken them in from the storm and stood ready to fight for them. A man with sad eyes and a broken heart and more courage than anyone she'd met. Yes, she said softly. I can do that. Sammy's voice interrupted them from across the room. The lady says he's telling the truth, Miss Maggie. She says Mr. Caleb is a good man. Maggie laughed, wiping her eyes. Well, if the lady says so. Emma crossed to Caleb and took his hand again as she had the night before. We should have pancakes for dinner, to celebrate. Celebrate what? Being a family. Emma's solemn face was utterly serious. That's what we are now, right? A family. Caleb looked at this child, at her brother across the room, at Maggie, whose gray-green eyes held something he hadn't seen in a very long time. Hope. Yeah, Emma, he heard himself say. I reckon we are. Zeke returned as the sun was setting, his face carved from stone. It's Crane, he confirmed. Heard them talking. They're waiting for the roads to clear, planning to ride in and take the children. How long do we have? 2 days, maybe 3 if we're lucky. The drifts are still deep, but they're melting fast. Caleb nodded grimly. Then we've got 2 days to prepare. Prepare for what? Maggie asked. They outnumber us 4-1 at least. They outnumber us in guns, Caleb agreed. But we've got something they don't. What's that? Caleb looked at the children by the fire, at Zeke's weathered face, at Maggie's fierce determination, and for the first time in 4 years, he smiled. Home ground, and something worth fighting for. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and tension. Caleb worked from dawn until well past dark, fortifying the ranch, stockpiling supplies, mapping escape routes through the hills. Zeke rode out twice more to monitor Crane's camp, each time returning with grimmer news. They're getting restless, Zeke reported on the second morning. Heard one of them say they'd ride out tomorrow, regardless of the roads. Then tomorrow we make our stand. Maggie had thrown herself into the preparations with fierce determination. She helped Caleb load rifles, memorized the layout of the property, learned which doors could be barricaded, and which windows offered the best defensive positions. Her hands trembled as she worked, but her jaw was set hard. I won't let them take my children, she said that evening, checking the ammunition for the 3rd time. I'll die first. Nobody's dying. Caleb took the bullets from her shaking hands. Maggie, look at me. She met his eyes, and he saw the terror she'd been hiding behind her determination, the same terror she'd probably felt every day since leaving Missouri. I've survived a war, Caleb said quietly. I've faced men who wanted to kill me, and I'm still here. Crane and his hired guns don't scare me. They should. You don't know what he's capable of. I know exactly what he's capable of. That's why I'm going to stop him. How? The word came out desperate. How can you stop a man who owns sheriffs and judges, who kills people and calls it accidents? Caleb set down the ammunition and took her hands in his. They were cold, trembling slightly. Crane's power comes from fear, he said, from people being too scared to stand against him. But out here, he's got no bought lawmen, no corrupt judges. Out here, he's just a man with a gun, and I've faced plenty of those. And if he wins, if he takes the children, he won't. But if he does, he won't. Caleb's voice was firm. I made a promise to those kids. I made a promise to you. And I don't break my promises." Maggie stared at him, her gray-green eyes searching his face. "Why do you care so much? You've known us 3 days." "Sometimes 3 days is enough." "Enough for what?" The question hung between them. Caleb knew what she was really asking. Could feel the pull between them, the connection that had been building since the moment she'd stood in his barn door, half frozen, begging for shelter. "Enough to know some things are worth fighting for," he said finally. "Some people are worth fighting for." Maggie's breath caught. "Caleb?" "Miss Maggie." Sammy's voice echoed from the main room. "Emma won't share the checkers?" The moment broke. Maggie pulled her hands from Caleb's, a flush spreading across her cheeks. "I should go. I'll finish here." She nodded and hurried toward the children's voices, leaving Caleb alone with his thoughts and a heart that was beating faster than it had in years. That night, after the children were asleep, Caleb found Maggie on the porch wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, settling beside her on the bench. "Too much thinking." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Tomorrow Crane comes. Tomorrow we send him packing." Maggie laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple. Hard, but simple." Caleb leaned back, looking up at the sky. "When I was in the war, my commander used to say that most battles are won or lost before the first shot is fired. It's all about who's more prepared, who wants it more. And who wants it more, us or Crane? Crane wants property, power, things he thinks he's owed." Caleb turned to face her. "We're fighting for lives, for family, for a future. That's worth more than anything Crane's ever fought for." Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "Tell me about Clara." Caleb stiffened. "What?" "Your wife. The woman Sammy sees in his dreams." Maggie's voice was gentle. "I'd like to know about her. If you're willing to tell me." For a moment, Caleb wanted to refuse. Clara was his memories, his grief, his guilt. He'd kept her locked away for 4 years, protected from the outside world. But something about Maggie about this night made the walls seem less necessary. She was stubborn, he heard himself say. Stubborn as a mule. Once she set her mind to something, nothing could change it. "Sounds familiar?" Caleb almost smiled. "Yeah. I reckon you two would have gotten along." He paused. "She loved this ranch. Loved the horses, the land, even the winters. She said Wyoming was God's country, and she was going to make it ours." "How did you meet?" "At a dance in Cheyenne. I was 30, fresh off the war, trying to figure out what to do with myself. She was 22, prettiest thing I'd ever seen. She walked right up to me, said she'd heard I was a rancher looking for a wife, and asked if I'd like to dance." Maggie laughed. "She sounds bold." "Bold doesn't begin to cover it." Caleb's voice softened with memory. "I was gone the moment she smiled at me. Asked her to marry me 3 weeks later. She said yes before I finished the question. And you were happy. Happier than I'd ever been. Happier than I thought I deserved." The old grief rose in his chest. "We tried for years to have a baby. Clara never gave up hope even when I did. Then finally, after 8 years, she told me she was pregnant." Maggie reached out and touched his arm. "Caleb, you don't have to." "I want to." The words surprised him with their truth. "I've never told anyone this, not even Zeke." Maggie waited in silence. "The baby came early." Caleb continued. "Clara wasn't due for another 3 weeks. I was supposed to be home, but there'd been reports of horse thieves on the North Range. I thought I could handle it quickly, be back before anything happened." "But you weren't." "No. By the time I got back, it was over. Clara was gone. The baby was gone. Zeke had buried them both on the hillside." Caleb's voice cracked. "I never got to hold my daughter, never got to say goodbye to my wife." That's not your fault. Isn't it? The guilt he'd carried for 4 years poured out. If I'd been there, maybe things would have been different. Maybe I could have gotten help faster. Maybe nothing. Maggie's voice was firm. Caleb, women die in childbirth every day, even with their husbands right beside them. You being there might not have changed anything. But I'll never know, will I? I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Yes, you will. Maggie's hand tightened on his arm. I spend every day wondering what if about my father. What if I'd heard the men coming? What if I'd hidden him somewhere safe? What if I'd taken Crane's deal from the start? She shook her head. But wondering doesn't change anything. It just keeps us trapped in the past. Caleb looked at her, at this woman who had known him only days, but somehow understood him better than people who'd known him for years. How do you stop? How do you let go of the guilt? I don't know. Maggie's smile was sad. I haven't figured that out yet. But I think maybe it helps to have something to live for. Something that matters more than the guilt. Like what? Like those 2 children in there who need me. Who need someone to protect them and love them and give them a future. Her eyes met his. Like maybe finding someone who understands what it's like to carry that weight. Someone who doesn't judge you for it. The air between them seemed to thicken. Caleb was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth of her hand on his arm, of the way her eyes reflected the starlight. Maggie, he said softly. Yes. When this is over, when Crane is gone, and you're safe, I want you to stay. Her breath caught. Caleb. Not because you have to. Not because you have nowhere else to go. But because... He struggled with words that had gone unused for 4 years. Because I think maybe Clara sent you to me. And I think maybe you and those children are exactly what I've been missing. What I've been too afraid to look for. We barely know each other. I know enough. I know you're brave and strong and stubborn as hell. I know you'd die for those children. I know you looked at a broken man and saw something worth saving. He took her hand. I know I feel more alive in the last 3 days than I have in 4 years. Maggie's eyes glistened with tears. I'm scared, Caleb. Not just of Crane. I'm scared of feeling this, of wanting this. So am I. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? The question silenced her. They sat in the cold night air, hands intertwined, the weight of possibility hanging between them. Finally, Maggie spoke. If we survive tomorrow, if Crane doesn't take everything from us, then I'll stay. Is that a promise? It's a hope. She squeezed his hand. The first real hope I've had since Papa died. Caleb raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Then we'd better make sure we survive tomorrow. They sat together until the cold drove them inside, not speaking, not needing to. Some things didn't require words. Dawn broke gray and cold, the sun hidden behind clouds that promised more snow. Caleb was up before first light, checking weapons, reviewing plans, trying to account for every possible contingency. Zeke found him in the barn, saddling Thunder. You going somewhere, boss? Meeting Crane before he gets here. On my terms, not his. That's a damn fool idea. Probably. Caleb tightened the cinch. But I want to see his face. Want him to know who he's dealing with. And if he decides to just shoot you on sight? Then you get the women and children to the hunting cabin and ride for Cheyenne. Find Judge Cole. Tell him everything. Zeke's weathered face was troubled. Caleb, I've known you since you were a boy. Watched you grow into a man. Watched you break when Miss Clara died. He paused. But this is the first time I've seen you whole again. Don't throw that away on some damn fool heroics. I'm not planning to die, Zeke. Nobody ever plans to. Then I'll just have to be careful. Caleb swung into the saddle. If I'm not back by noon, do what I said. Caleb. Promise me, Zeke. The old foreman sighed heavily. I promise. Caleb rode out as the sun crept above the horizon, following the trail toward the east, where Crane's men were camped. The snow was still deep in places, forcing Thunder to pick his way carefully, but the horse was sure-footed and familiar with the terrain. He found them breaking camp in a small valley, 8 men in heavy coats gathered around a dying fire. Their horses were picketed nearby, saddled and ready. At the center of the group stood a tall man in a black coat, his silver-streaked dark hair neatly combed, his bearing that of someone accustomed to command. Victor Crane. Caleb reined Thunder to a stop at the edge of the valley in clear view, but out of easy rifle range. That's far enough, one of the hired guns shouted, his hand going to his weapon. Crane held up a hand, stopping him. Wait! He peered at Caleb with cold, calculating eyes. Well, well. You must be the rancher. Harrington, isn't it? You're on my land, Crane. Am I? My apologies. I'm simply passing through. With 8 armed men. Crane smiled, a thin expression that didn't reach his eyes. The frontier is dangerous. A man of means must protect himself. Cut the horse shit. Caleb's voice was hard. I know why you're here, and I'm here to tell you to turn around. I'm afraid I can't do that. I'm looking for my niece and nephew, poor children orphaned after their father's tragic accident. Their sister took them without authorization. I'm simply trying to bring them home. Funny thing about that accident, I heard it wasn't an accident at all. Something flickered in Crane's eyes. I don't know what you've heard, Mr. Harrington, but I assure you, I heard you beat Thomas Sinclair to death in his own barn. I heard you forged guardianship papers. I heard you've been trying to force his daughter into marriage. Caleb leaned forward in his saddle. And I heard there's a witness, a child who saw everything. For the first time, Crane's composure cracked. His face went pale, then flushed with anger. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. And who exactly is going to believe a child over a respected businessman? The sheriff, the judge. They know me. They trust me. The sheriff and judge in Missouri, maybe. But we're in Wyoming now. Different territory, different laws, different judges. Caleb smiled grimly. I've already sent word to Judge Nathaniel Cole in Cheyenne. Told him everything. If anything happens to me or those children, he'll know exactly who to come looking for. Crane's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. Try me. The 2 men stared at each other across the snowy valley. Crane's hired guns shifted uneasily, their hands hovering near their weapons. Let me be perfectly clear. Crane said, his voice low and dangerous. Those children are mine, legally, morally. The girl will marry me. The children will be raised properly, and this unfortunate chapter will be closed. Let me be perfectly clear, Caleb replied. If you or your men set foot on my property, I will put you in the ground. If you threaten those children or their sister, I will put you in the ground. And if you ever come near them again, I will personally drag you to Cheyenne and watch you hang for murder. You're one man. I'm one man who's got nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. You want to test that right on in. See what happens. Crane studied him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. You think you're some kind of hero, don't you? The brave rancher protecting the helpless widow? It's almost romantic. He stepped forward, his voice dropping to a sneer. But I've crushed heroes before. I've crushed men with more resources, more connections, more power than you could ever dream of. You're nothing, a speck, an inconvenience to be swept aside. Then sweep me aside. Come on, try. The challenge hung in the air. Crane's hand twitched toward his coat where Caleb guessed a pistol was hidden. The hired guns tensed. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Then Crane smiled again, his composure returning. No, not today. Not like this. He turned to his men. Pack up. We're moving. "Boss," one of them questioned. "I said pack up." Crane's eyes never left Caleb. "Mr. Harrington has made his position clear. I respect a man who defends what he considers his. But this isn't over. It's just postponed. If I see you again, you won't. Not until I'm ready." Crane mounted his horse with fluid grace. "But when I am ready, when I return with legal authority and proper documentation, you'll hand over those children, or you'll face consequences you can't imagine." "I've faced war, Crane. I've faced death. Your consequences don't scare me." "They should." Crane gathered his reins. "Give my regards to Miss Sinclair. Tell her I'll see her soon, one way or another." He wheeled his horse and rode out his men falling in behind him. Caleb watched until they disappeared over the ridge, his hand never straying from his rifle. Only when they were gone did he let out the breath he'd been holding. It wasn't over. Crane had made that clear. But they had time. Time to prepare to gather evidence to build a case that even Crane's money couldn't buy his way out of. Caleb turned Thunder toward home. He was halfway back when he heard the gunshot. The sound cracked through the cold air, echoing off the hills. Then another, and another. Caleb kicked Thunder into a gallop, his heart slamming against his ribs. The shots were coming from the ranch. He crested the final hill and saw smoke rising from one of the outbuildings. Men on horseback circled the main house. Muzzle flashes sparked from windows as someone inside returned fire. Crane hadn't retreated. He'd sent his men around. It was a trap. Caleb drew his rifle and charged toward the chaos. He took the first rider from behind the man, tumbling from his saddle without ever knowing what hit him. A second man turned, raising his weapon, but Caleb was faster. The man spun and fell. "Caleb!" Zeke's voice roared from the house. "They came from the north. We're pinned down. I'm coming." He rode low over Thunder's neck, bullets whizzing past him. One of Crane's men blocked his path. Caleb didn't slow down. He crashed into the man's horse, sending both animal and rider sprawling, then leaped from the saddle onto the porch. The front door was barricaded. He pounded on it. "It's me, open up!" The door flew open, and Maggie yanked him inside, her face streaked with soot, a rifle clutched in her hands. "Thank God. I thought, where are the children?" "Root cellar. With Ruth. They're safe." "Zeke." "Kitchen window. Holding off two of them." Caleb moved to a side window, assessing the situation. 3 men were still mounted, circling. 2 more had taken cover behind the water trough. The outbuilding, his workshop, was fully engulfed in flames. "How many came?" 6. "You got 2 outside." Maggie's voice was surprisingly steady. "That leaves 4. Can you shoot?" "Papa taught me." "Then pick a window and start shooting. Aim for the horses if you can't hit the men. I want them on foot." Maggie nodded and moved to position. A moment later, her rifle cracked. One of the circling horses screamed and went down, its rider tumbling into the snow. "Good shot." "I was aiming for the rider." Despite everything, Caleb felt a surge of something that might have been love. "Keep trying." The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Zeke dropped 1 man from the kitchen. Caleb got another through the front window. Maggie wounded a 3rd, sending him scrambling for cover. Then suddenly, it was quiet. "They're pulling back," Zeke called. Caleb watched through the window as the remaining men gathered their wounded and retreated north. He counted 3, still mounted 1, limping alongside, 1 being carried. "Don't follow them," Zeke warned, appearing in the doorway. "Could be another trap." "I know." Caleb set down his rifle, his hands shaking with adrenaline. "Everyone all right?" Ruth took a splinter from a ricochet. "Nothing serious. The children are scared but unhurt." "And you?" Zeke grinned, revealing a bloody cut on his cheek. "Takes more than some Eastern hired guns to put me down." Caleb turned to Maggie, who was leaning against the wall, her face pale but determined. "You okay?" She nodded, then shook her head, then burst into tears. Caleb crossed to her in 2 steps, gathering her into his arms. She clung to him, her whole body shaking. "It's okay," he murmured. "It's over. We're alive. I thought they were going to kill us. I thought—" "Shh, they didn't. They won't." He held her tighter. "You were incredible, Maggie. You held them off. I was terrified." Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. He pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "You are the bravest woman I've ever known." "Caleb?" "Miss Maggie." A small voice came from the hallway. Sammy stood there, Ruth's hand on his shoulder, Emma pressed against his side. "Is the bad man gone?" Maggie pulled away from Caleb, wiping her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, he's gone." "Is Mr. Caleb okay?" "I'm okay, Sammy." Caleb crouched to the boy's level. "Are you and Emma all right?" "We were scared, but Ruth said you'd protect us." Sammy's dark eyes were solemn. "The pretty lady said so too. She said you'd never let the bad man win." Caleb felt his throat tighten. The pretty lady was right. She's always right. Sammy reached out and took Caleb's hand. "Can I stay with you now? I don't want to go back to the cellar." "You don't have to. The fighting's over. Forever." Caleb looked at the destruction around them, the bullet holes in the walls, the shattered windows, the smoke still rising from his workshop. He thought of Crane retreating, but not defeated. Of the battle that was won, but the war that continued. "Not forever," he said honestly, "but for now. And now is enough." Sammy nodded, accepting this, with the strange wisdom of childhood. "Okay, can we have pancakes?" Despite everything, Caleb laughed. "Yeah, Sammy, I think we've earned some pancakes." The days following the attack were filled with rebuilding and planning. Caleb worked from sunrise to well past sunset, repairing bullet holes, replacing shattered windows, clearing the charred remains of his workshop. The physical labor helped keep his mind focused, but the threat of Crane's return hung over the ranch like a gathering storm. Zeke rode to town 3 days after the attack, returning with news that spread through the household like wildfire. "Crane's gone to Cheyenne," he reported, his weathered face grim. "Word is he's meeting with lawyers, planning to come back with official papers." "What kind of papers?" Maggie's voice was tight with fear. "Guardianship documents. Arrest warrants, maybe. He's claiming you kidnapped those children, Maggie. Says you're unstable, dangerous." "That's a lie." "Course it is, but lies become truth when enough money backs them up." Caleb set down the hammer he'd been using. "How long do we have?" "Week, maybe 2. Depends on how fast the courts move." "Then we need to move faster." Caleb turned to Maggie. "That drawing Emma made. We need to get it to Judge Cole before Crane poisons the well." "And how do we do that? Ride into Cheyenne ourselves? Crane probably has men watching the roads." "Not me." Caleb's mind was racing. "Zeke. He can take the long way around through the mountains, avoid the main trails." Zeke nodded slowly. "Could do it. 3 days, maybe 4 if the weather holds." "It's too dangerous," Maggie protested. "If Crane's men catch him, they won't catch me." Zeke's voice was firm. "I know these hills better than any Eastern hired gun. I'll get through." "And what do we do while we wait?" Maggie asked. "Sit here and hope." "No." Caleb met her eyes. "We gather more evidence. Talk to people who know Crane. Find others willing to testify." "Who would testify against him? Everyone's afraid." "Fear can be overcome, especially when people realize they're not alone." That evening, Caleb sat with Emma at the kitchen table, her drawing spread between them. The 3 faces stared up at him, crude but distinctive. A man with a scar, a man with a crooked nose, a man with small, mean eyes. "Emma, I need you to tell me everything you remember about that night." The little girl's face went pale. "I don't want to." "I know, sweetheart. I know it's hard. But what you saw could help put those men in jail. Could make sure they never hurt anyone again." Emma's hands twisted in her lap. Maggie moved to her side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You don't have to do this if you're not ready," Maggie said softly. "But I do." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "For Papa." She took a deep breath and began to speak. "It was late. I was supposed to be asleep, but I heard voices, angry voices. I went to the window and saw men on horses, 3 of them. Did you recognize them?" "No, but I could see their faces in the moonlight." Emma pointed to her drawing. "This one did most of the talking. He was the leader." "What did he say?" "He said Papa had to sign something. Papa said no. Then the leader hit him." Emma's voice cracked. "He hit him again and again. Papa fell down and they kept hitting him." Maggie pulled Emma closer, tears streaming down her own face. "Did anyone say Crane's name?" Caleb asked gently. Emma nodded. "The leader. When Papa was on the ground, he said something like, Mr. Crane sends his regards. Then they left." "You're sure he said Crane's name?" "I'm sure. I'll never forget it." Caleb felt hope surge in his chest. This was it. Direct evidence connecting Crane to the attack. Combined with the drawing, it might be enough. "Emma, you're the bravest girl I've ever known." "I don't feel brave. I feel scared." "That's what makes you brave. Being scared and doing it anyway." Emma looked up at him with those 2 old eyes. "Will you really make them pay for what they did to Papa?" "I promise." Zeke left before dawn the next morning, Emma's drawing carefully wrapped in oilcloth and tucked inside his coat. Caleb watched him ride out, the old man's silhouette disappearing into the gray light. "He'll make it," Maggie said, appearing beside him. "I know he will. And if he doesn't, then we'll find another way." Caleb turned to face her. "I'm not giving up, Maggie, not ever." She reached out and took his hand. "I know. That's one of the things I love about you." The word hung between them. Love. She'd said it casually, almost carelessly, but the weight of it filled the air. "Maggie, I didn't mean—" She flushed. "I just meant—" "I know what you meant." Caleb squeezed her hand. "And I feel the same way." Her eyes widened. "You do?" "I've been alone for 4 years, Maggie. Told myself I didn't need anyone. Didn't want anyone. But then you knocked on my door, half frozen, those children in your arms, and something changed. Something woke up." "Caleb." "I know it's too fast. I know we've only known each other a week. But I feel like I've been waiting for you my whole life. Like Clara knew. Like she sent you to me." Maggie's eyes glistened. "I feel it too. But I'm scared. What if we just take it one day at a time? No promises we can't keep. No expectations. Just see where this goes." She studied his face for a long moment. Then she smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed her serious features into something beautiful. "One day at a time," she agreed. "I can do that." 3 days passed, then 4, then 5. No word from Zeke, no sign of Crane's return. The waiting was agony, every creak of the house, sending hearts racing, every distant sound of hoofbeats, bringing everyone to the windows. On the 6th day, Sammy found Caleb in the barn brushing Thunder's coat. "Mr. Caleb." "Yeah, Sammy." "The pretty lady came to me last night." Caleb's hand stilled on the brush. "What did she say?" "She said the waiting is almost over. She said something big is coming." Sammy's small face was serious. "She said to tell you she's proud of you." Caleb felt his throat tighten. "Proud of me for what?" "For opening the door. She said you finally opened the door." The yellow door. Lily's room. The door he'd kept closed for 4 years and finally opened because of a strange child's message. "Did she say anything else?" Sammy nodded. "She said the bad man is coming back, tomorrow. But she said not to be afraid. She said the truth always wins in the end." "Do you believe her?" "I always believe her." Sammy reached out and took Caleb's hand. Do you believe her, Mr. Caleb? Caleb looked down at this child, this small, wounded, remarkable child who had somehow become essential to him in ways he couldn't explain. Yeah, Sammy, I believe her. That night, Caleb called everyone together in the main room. Maggie, Ruth, the children, his family, he realized. Somehow in the space of a week, they had become his family. Sammy says Crane is coming back tomorrow, he announced. How does Sammy know? Ruth asked, her brow furrowed. The lady told him, Emma answered matter-of-factly. She's always right. Caleb didn't try to explain. There were things in this world that defied explanation, and Clara's presence was one of them. If he's coming, we need to be ready. But this time we're not hiding. We're not running. We're meeting him head-on. How? Maggie asked. I've sent word to Reverend Holloway and Doc Patterson. Ask them to be here tomorrow. Witnesses. Respectable witnesses that even Crane can't dismiss. You think they'll come? Reverend Holloway owes me. I saved his wife's horse last winter when everyone else said to put her down. And Doc Patterson has no love for Crane's type. He'll come. And if Crane brings enough men to just take what he wants anyway, then we fight, same as before. Caleb looked around the room at these people who had become his world. But I don't think it'll come to that. Crane operates in shadows. He uses manipulation and intimidation. Drag him into the light with witnesses watching, and he loses his power. You're betting our lives on that, Maggie said quietly. I'm betting our lives on the truth, on justice, on the belief that right matters more than might. He met her eyes. It's the only bet worth making. Dawn came cold and bright, the sky clear for the first time in days. Caleb was on the porch before the sun fully rose, rifle across his lap, watching the road. Reverend Holloway arrived first, his black coat flapping as he dismounted. He was a thin man with kind eyes and a voice that could shake rafters during sermons. Caleb, got your message. What's this about? Trouble coming, Reverend. I need witnesses. What kind of trouble? The kind that wears expensive suits and buys courts. Doc Patterson rode in shortly after, his medical bag strapped to his saddle. He was older than the Reverend, with white hair and steady hands. Harrington, heard you've taken in some strays. They're family now, Doc. Family, huh? Patterson's eyes twinkled. Good. This place has been too quiet too long. By mid-morning, everyone was assembled. Maggie stood near Caleb, pale but resolute. The children were in the house with Ruth under strict orders to stay hidden unless called. Here they come, Caleb said quietly. A group of riders appeared on the horizon, moving at a steady pace toward the ranch. As they drew closer, Caleb counted 8 men. Crane rode at the front, flanked by the sheriff and what looked like a deputy. Behind them came 5 more men, hired guns from the look of them. But there was someone else. A 9th rider hanging back from the group, an older woman on a dappled mare. Caleb frowned. He didn't recognize her. Crane reined in his horse at the edge of the property, his cold eyes taking in the assembled group. His gaze lingered on Reverend Holloway and Doc Patterson with evident displeasure. Mr. Harrington, I see you've brought friends. Witnesses, Caleb corrected. Figured whatever happens today should be properly documented. How thoughtful. Crane's voice dripped with false warmth. Allow me to introduce Sheriff Warren. He's come all the way from Missouri with proper authorization to retrieve my wards. The sheriff, a heavy-set man with a red face and nervous eyes, stepped forward. Mr. Harrington, I have here a court order granting custody of Abigail and Samuel Sinclair to Mr. Victor Crane. I'm obligated to enforce this order. Court order from where? Caleb asked. Missouri. Judge Hammond's court. Judge Hammond. Caleb laughed humorlessly. Crane's pet judge. That order isn't worth the paper it's printed on. Now see here. No, you see here. Caleb stepped forward. This is Wyoming territory. Missouri court orders have no jurisdiction here. If Crane wants those children, he'll need to go through a Wyoming court. That's exactly what I intend to do, Crane said smoothly. I've already filed papers in Cheyenne, but in the meantime those children are in danger. Their guardian, he gestured dismissively at Maggie, is clearly unstable. She's already fled one jurisdiction. Who knows what she might do next? The only danger to those children is Ukraine. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Harrington. It's a serious crime. Caleb turned to the witnesses. Victor Crane had Thomas Sinclair murdered, beat him to death in his own barn and called it an accident. There's a witness, a child who saw everything. Crane's face went pale with rage. Lies, the ravings of a traumatized child. Is that so? A new voice entered the conversation. Everyone turned to see the older woman urging her horse forward. She was perhaps 60, with gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that burned with long-suppressed fury. "And who the hell are you?" Crane demanded. "Someone you thought you'd silenced years ago." The woman's voice was steady. "My name is Agnes Hawkins. I was your first wife's maid." Something shifted in Crane's expression. Fear. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. I was there, Victor. I was there the night Elizabeth died. The night you held a pillow over her face because she threatened to expose your financial crimes." The words fell like stones into still water. Reverend Holloway gasped. Doc Patterson's hand moved to his medical bag as if preparing for violence. "This is absurd," Crane sputtered. "This woman is obviously deranged. I've lived with what I saw for 15 years. Agnes continued, her voice rising. "Stayed silent because I was afraid. Because you owned everyone who could have helped me. But I'm not afraid anymore. No one will believe you. You're a servant, a nobody. Maybe, but I'm a nobody with evidence." Agnes reached into her coat and produced a folded document. "Elizabeth's diary. She wrote everything down. Your threats, your crimes, everything. I've kept it hidden all these years waiting for the right moment." "Give me that." Crane lunged forward, but Caleb stepped between them. "I don't think so. This is theft. That document belongs to me. It belongs to your dead wife, the wife you murdered." Agnes handed the diary to Reverend Holloway. "I give this to the church for safekeeping. Let God's representative decide what to do with it." The Reverend took the diary with trembling hands. This is extraordinary." "It's a lie." Crane's composure had completely shattered. His face was red spittle flying from his lips. "All of it. A conspiracy against me." "Conspiracy." Maggie stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "My father is dead because of you, beaten to death by your men. My brother saw it happen, and now you come here with your bought sheriff and your forged papers thinking you can take my children. They're not your children. They're more mine than they'll ever be yours." Maggie was shaking with rage, but she didn't back down. "I've fed them, clothed them, protected them. I've loved them through the worst time of their lives. What have you done? Threatened them, used them as bargaining chips. I've provided for them, given them opportunities. You've tried to steal them, to own them, like you tried to own me." Maggie's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "But we're not property, Mr. Crane. We're human beings, and we will never, ever belong to you." The silence that followed was deafening. Crane stood frozen, his face a mask of impotent rage. Then from the house, a small voice called out, "Mr. Caleb!" Everyone turned. Sammy stood in the doorway, his small face pale but determined. "Sammy, go back inside," Maggie called. "No." The boy stepped onto the porch. "I need to tell them about what I saw. Sammy, I saw him." Sammy pointed directly at Crane. "I saw his men hurt my papa. I was hiding in the barn. They didn't know I was there." "The child is lying," Crane said desperately. "He wasn't there. I was there." Sammy's voice grew stronger. "I saw the man with the scar hit Papa. I heard him say, 'Mr. Crane sends his regards.' I saw Papa fall down and not get back up." "This is inadmissible. A child's testimony is perfectly admissible in Wyoming courts." Doc Patterson interrupted. especially when corroborated by other evidence, which we seem to have plenty of. Crane's eyes darted around, seeking allies, finding none. Even his hired guns had backed away, clearly uncomfortable with the turn events had taken. Sheriff Warren stepped forward, his face troubled. "Mr. Crane, perhaps we should do nothing. We should take those children and leave. I don't think that's going to happen." A new voice. Everyone turned to see 3 riders approaching from the east. At their head was an older man with white hair and a bearing of absolute authority. "Judge Cole!" Reverend Holloway exclaimed. "Reverend." The judge dismounted stiffly. "I received some disturbing information a few days ago. Rode out as quickly as I could." His eyes swept over the assembled group, settling on Crane with cold contempt. "Victor Crane, I've been wanting to meet you for some time." Crane's face had gone ashen. "Judge Cole, this is all a misunderstanding." "I doubt that." Cole gestured to one of his companions. Zeke Caleb realized with a surge of relief. "This man brought me some very interesting evidence. A drawing made by a child witness. Testimony about a murder. And now I arrive to find even more evidence of your crimes. This is Wyoming. You have no authority over what happened in Missouri." "No. But I have authority over what happens here, and what's happening here is obstruction of justice, intimidation of witnesses, and attempted kidnapping." Cole turned to the sheriff. "Warren isn't it. I suggest you take your Missouri warrant and go home. It has no power here." "But Mr. Crane said—" "I don't care what Crane said. I'm telling you to leave, now." Warren hesitated, looking between Crane and the judge. Then slowly he nodded. "Yes, sir." "You can't do this," Crane shouted. "Those children are mine. The girl is mine. I have papers." "You have fraudulent documents obtained through corruption and intimidation." Cole's voice was ice. "You have a history of murder stretching back 15 years, and you have about 30 seconds to surrender peacefully before I have you arrested." "Arrested on what charge?" "For now, conspiracy to commit kidnapping. But by the time the Missouri authorities are finished investigating, I expect we'll add murder to the list." Cole nodded to his deputies. "Take him." What happened next was chaos. Crane drew a pistol from his coat, swinging it toward Maggie. "If I can't have her, no one will—" Caleb moved without thinking, throwing himself in front of Maggie as the gun fired. The bullet hit him in the shoulder, spinning him around. He heard Maggie scream, heard more gunshots, heard bodies hitting the ground. Then everything went gray, and he knew no more. He woke to pain, searing, throbbing pain in his left shoulder, and to a small hand holding his. "Mr. Caleb," Sammy's voice. Caleb forced his eyes open. He was in his bedroom. Bandages wrapped his shoulder and chest. Doc Patterson stood nearby, washing his hands in a basin. "Welcome back," the doctor said gruffly. "Thought we lost you for a minute there." "Crane. Dead. One of the deputies shot him when he tried to fire again." Patterson dried his hands. "Probably saved us all the trouble of a trial." "Maggie, the children." "We're here." Maggie's face appeared above him, tear-streaked but smiling. "We're all here. We're safe." "You saved Miss Maggie," Sammy said solemnly. "The pretty lady said you would. She said you're a hero." "I'm not—" Caleb tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain lanced through his shoulder. "Lie still," Patterson ordered. "That bullet went clean through, but you've lost a lot of blood. You need rest." "The children are fine. Judge Cole has already declared Crane's guardianship documents void. As far as the law is concerned, Miss Sinclair is their legal guardian." Patterson gathered his bag. "I'll check on you tomorrow. Try not to do anything stupid in the meantime." After the doctor left, Maggie sat on the edge of the bed, her hand finding Caleb's. "You could have died." "But I didn't. You jumped in front of a bullet for me." "I'd do it again." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why? Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" Caleb reached up with his good hand, brushing the tears from her face. Because some things are worth dying for, and some people are worth living for. He smiled weakly. You're both Maggie. You and those children. You're everything. Caleb, marry me. The words came out before he could stop them. Maggie's eyes went wide. What? Marry me. Not today. Not tomorrow. But someday when all this is settled, when we've had time to heal, marry me and make this family official. Caleb, you're delirious. The blood loss. I've never been more clear-headed in my life. He squeezed her hand. I've spent 4 years dying inside. Then you knocked on my door and everything changed. I don't want to waste another minute pretending I don't feel what I feel. Maggie was silent for a long moment. Then slowly a smile spread across her face. Ask me again when you're not bleeding on the bedsheets. Is that a yes? It's a we'll see. She leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to his forehead. Now rest. You've earned it. As she rose to leave, Sammy climbed onto the bed beside Caleb, careful to avoid his injured shoulder. The pretty lady says you did good, the boy said. She says Clara is happy. You talked to her. Just now, while you were sleeping. Sammy snuggled closer. She said to tell you thank you. For loving again. For letting us in. Caleb felt tears prick his eyes. Tell her she's welcome. Tell her I'll never forget her. She knows. Sammy's voice was growing sleepy. She says she'll always be watching. She says Lily waves to you every night from the stars. Caleb closed his eyes, letting the tears fall. Somewhere, somehow, Clara was still with him. Still loving him. Still guiding him. And now, finally, he had someone to share that love with. The weeks that followed Crane's death passed in a blur of healing and hope. Caleb's shoulder mended slowly, the wound leaving a scar that matched the one Clara had left on his heart, permanent, but no longer painful. Spring arrived early that year, as if the land itself was eager to move past the darkness of winter. The snow melted, the river swelled, and Thunder Creek Ranch came alive with a vitality it hadn't known in 4 years. Judge Cole had been thorough in his work. Crane's hired men were arrested and transported to Missouri to face charges. Agnes Hawkins's testimony, combined with Elizabeth Crane's diary, had opened investigations into crimes stretching back 15 years. The empire Crane had built on blood and fear was crumbling, and those he had terrorized were finally finding their voices. Letter came today, Zeke announced one morning, handing Caleb an envelope bearing an official seal. From the territorial court. Caleb opened it with his good hand, scanning the contents. A smile spread across his face. What is it? Maggie asked, looking up from the bread dough she was kneading. Guardianship papers. Official ones this time. He held up the document. Judge Cole has granted you full legal custody of Sammy and Emma. No one can ever take them from you again. Maggie's hands stilled. For a moment she didn't move. Then her shoulders began to shake. Maggie. She turned, tears streaming down her flour-dusted cheeks, and threw herself into his arms. It's over, she whispered. It's really over. It's over. Caleb held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. You're safe. They're safe. Forever. Miss Maggie's crying again, Sammy observed from the doorway. Is she sad? No, sweetheart. Maggie pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm happy. These are happy tears. That doesn't make sense. Lots of things don't make sense when you're grown up. Caleb ruffled the boy's hair. You'll understand someday. The pretty lady cries happy tears sometimes too, Sammy said thoughtfully. She says they're the best kind. She's right about that. As the days grew longer and warmer, the ranch transformed. Ruth took over the kitchen completely, her cooking filling the house with smells that made everyone's mouths water. Zeke worked alongside Caleb, teaching the children about horses and cattle and the 1,000 small tasks that kept a ranch running. Emma bloomed like one of the wildflowers that dotted the pastures. Her solemn silence gave way to laughter, her two old eyes regaining some of their childhood sparkle. She spent hours with the horses, developing a particular bond with a gentle mare named Starlight, the same horse Clara had loved. "She's got a gift," Zeke observed one afternoon, watching Emma guide Starlight through the corral. "Never seen a child connect with horses like that." "Clara was the same way," Caleb said softly. "Maybe that's why Emma loves it so much. Maybe she senses something." "You believe that Miss Clara's spirit is still here?" Caleb watched Emma laugh as Starlight nuzzled her shoulder. "I believe love doesn't end just because someone dies. I believe the people we lose stay with us in ways we can't always explain." "Reckon that's as good an answer as any." Sammy, meanwhile, had attached himself permanently to Caleb's side. The boy followed him everywhere, asking endless questions, eager to learn everything about ranching. His nightmares had faded, replaced by dreams he described in vivid detail each morning. Dreams of the pretty lady and her baby, of sunshine and flowers, of a heaven that sounded remarkably like Thunder Creek Ranch. "Mr. Caleb," Sammy asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, "are you going to marry Miss Maggie?" Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. "What makes you ask that?" "The pretty lady said you would. She said it would make everyone happy." "Did she now?" "She said you're scared, though. Scared because you loved someone before and she went away." Sammy's small face was serious. "But she said Miss Clara wants you to be happy. She said that's why she sent us." Caleb set down his cup, his throat tight. "Sammy, do you really talk to her, to Clara?" "Every night. She comes to me before I fall asleep." Sammy looked up at him with those ancient eyes. "She says she's proud of you. She says you finally opened your heart." "I did. When you opened the yellow door, that's when everything changed." Sammy reached out and took Caleb's hand. "She says it's okay to love Miss Maggie. She says love isn't like a well that runs dry. It's like a river that keeps flowing and flowing." Caleb blinked back tears. It was exactly the kind of thing Clara would say. The kind of wisdom she had possessed in abundance. "Thank you, Sammy." "For what?" "For bringing her back to me. For letting me hear her voice again, even if it's through you." Sammy smiled. "That's what family's for, right?" "Yeah, son, that's what family's for." That night, after the children were asleep, Caleb found Maggie in the kitchen washing the last of the dinner dishes. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her, the graceful way she moved the auburn hair escaping from its braid, the quiet strength in every line of her body. "You're staring," she said without turning around. "Can't help it. You're worth staring at." She turned, a smile playing at her lips. "Caleb Harrington, are you flirting with me?" "Trying to." "How am I doing?" "Passably." She dried her hands on a towel. "What's on your mind?" "Sammy asked me something today, about whether I was going to marry you." Maggie's smile faded into something more uncertain. "Oh. I told you once that I'd ask you again when I wasn't bleeding on the bedsheets." Caleb crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Well, I've stopped bleeding. The shoulder's nearly healed, and I've been doing a lot of thinking." "Caleb, let me finish, please." He took a deep breath. 4 years ago, I buried my wife and daughter. I thought my life was over. I thought I'd never feel anything again except grief and guilt. But then you came, you and those children, and everything changed. "I know the timing seems fast," he continued. "I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I've learned something these past years. Life is short, unpredictable, cruel sometimes, and when you find something worth holding on to, you hold on with both hands." "Caleb, you don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer ever if you don't want to. But I need you to know how I feel. I need you to know that I love you, Maggie Sinclair. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you'd walk through fire for those children. I love how you make this house feel like a home again. I love—" Maggie silenced him with a kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was fierce, desperate. 4 years of loneliness and weeks of waiting all pouring out at once. Caleb's arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Maggie's eyes were shining. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, yes, yes." She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting for you to ask properly for weeks." "You have?" "Of course I have. What did you think I was doing just hanging around for the free meals?" Caleb laughed, a real laugh, the kind he hadn't made in years. "I don't know what I thought. I was too scared to think." "Scared? You faced down Crane and his men. You took a bullet for me. What could you possibly be scared of?" "Losing you." The words came out raw, honest. "Losing this, loving someone again and having them taken away." Maggie cupped his face in her hands. "I'm not going anywhere, Caleb. None of us are. This is our home now. You're our home. Promise. Promise." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, two broken people made whole by love and loss, and the strange miracle of finding each other in the middle of a snowstorm. "We should tell the children," Maggie said finally. "Tomorrow. Let's have tonight just for us." "Caleb Harrington, are you being romantic?" "Trying to. How am I doing?" "Better than passably." She kissed him again, softer this time. Much better. The wedding was held 3 weeks later on a brilliant spring day when the wildflowers were blooming and the air smelled of new beginnings. Reverend Holloway performed the ceremony on the porch of the ranch house with Zeke and Ruth standing witness. Emma served as flower girl, scattering petals with solemn concentration. Sammy stood beside Caleb as his best man, wearing a new suit that Ruth had sewn for the occasion. "Dearly beloved," the Reverend began, "we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. But I think we're also here to celebrate something else, a family, a home, a second chance at happiness for two people who thought they'd lost everything." Caleb looked at Maggie, beautiful, in a simple white dress, her auburn hair crowned with wildflowers. She looked back at him with eyes full of love and trust and hope. "Caleb Harrington, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" "I do." "Margaret Sinclair, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." The Reverend smiled. "You may kiss the bride." Caleb kissed Maggie as Sammy and Emma cheered. Ruth wiped tears from her eyes. Zeke's weathered face creased in a smile. And somewhere Caleb could have sworn he heard Clara's laugh, not sad, not reproachful, but joyful, celebrating with them, blessing them. "I love you," he murmured against Maggie's lips. "I love you too," she whispered back. "Forever. Forever." After the ceremony, they gathered around the big table for a feast Ruth had been preparing for days. Laughter filled the house. Real laughter, the kind that had been absent for far too long. Stories were told, toasts were made, and for a few precious hours, the shadow of the past lifted completely. As evening fell, Caleb found himself on the porch again, watching the sun set over his land, his home, his family. Maggie joined him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything was a month ago. I was alone, empty, going through the motions." He squeezed her hand. "Now look at me. A wife, 2 children, a reason to wake up in the morning. Regrets? Not a single one. Mr. Caleb, Miss Maggie." Sammy burst through the door, his face alight with excitement. "Emma says she saw a shooting star. Come look." They followed him into the yard where Emma stood pointing at the sky. As if on cue, another star streaked across the darkness, trailing silver fire. "Make a wish," Sammy commanded. Caleb closed his eyes. When he opened them again, Maggie was watching him. "What did you wish for?" "Can't tell you. It won't come true." "That's a silly superstition." "Maybe." He smiled. "But I already have everything I wished for standing right here." Maggie leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. Emma took Caleb's other hand, her small fingers warm against his palm. Sammy stood in front of them, tilting his head back to watch for more stars. "The pretty lady says she's happy," Sammy said softly. "She says this is exactly how it was supposed to be." "Tell her thank you," Caleb said, "for sending you to me, for giving me back my life." "She knows." Sammy turned and smiled up at him. "She always knows." That night, after the children were tucked in and the house had gone quiet, Caleb made his way to the yellow room for the first time since the confrontation with Crane. The nursery looked different now. Ruth had dusted and aired it out. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser beside the music box. The yellow walls seemed to glow in the lamplight. Caleb picked up the music box, turning it over in his hands. He opened the lid, letting Clara's lullaby fill the room, the same melody Sammy had hummed that first night, the thread that had connected past to present grief to healing. "I kept my promise, Clara," he said softly. "I opened the door. I let them in." The music played on gentle and sweet. "I'll never forget you. You know that, right? You and Lily will always be part of me. But I think maybe that's okay. I think maybe that's how it's supposed to be, carrying you with me while still moving forward." He set down the music box and moved to the crib, running his hand along the smooth wood. The quilt Clara had stitched still lay folded inside the embroidered butterflies and flowers, faded but intact. "Maggie wants to turn this into a sewing room," he continued. "I said yes. I hope that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm forgetting you. It just means I'm letting this room have a new purpose, a new life." The music wound down, the last notes hanging in the air. "Thank you for sending them to me. Thank you for the lullaby and the dreams and the messages through Sammy. Thank you for loving me enough to want me to be happy again." He closed his eyes, and for just a moment he felt it, a warmth, a presence, a whisper of touch on his cheek. "Goodbye, Clara. Goodbye, Lily. I'll see you both again someday. But not yet. I've got a life to live first, a family to raise, a wife to love." When he opened his eyes, the room was empty. But the emptiness didn't hurt anymore. It was peaceful, complete. He closed the door gently behind him and walked to the bedroom he now shared with Maggie. She was sitting up in bed reading by lamplight, but she set the book aside when he entered. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "I was saying goodbye to Clara, to the grief, to the guilt, to the part of me that was stuck in the past." He kissed her palm. "I'm ready to be here now, fully here, with you." Maggie's eyes filled with tears. "Caleb?" "No more ghosts, Maggie. No more shadows. Just us. Just this." She pulled him close, holding him tight. "I love you. I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." They lay together in the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds of the house, settling the creak of old wood, the whisper of wind, the distant whinny of horses in the barn. "Caleb," Maggie's voice was soft. "Yeah. Do you think we'll be happy?" "I know we will." "How can you be sure?" Caleb thought about everything that had brought them here, the storm, the desperate knock on his barn door, Sammy's haunting lullaby, Crane's evil, and defeat, the slow healing of wounds both visible and invisible. "Because we've already survived the worst. Because we found each other against all odds. And because I believe in something now that I didn't believe in before." What's that? Second chances. The idea that it's never too late to start over. That broken hearts can heal. That the people we lose never really leave us. He pulled her closer. I believe love is stronger than death, stronger than grief, stronger than anything. That's beautiful. That's the truth. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, ancient and eternal. Somewhere in those vast depths, Caleb liked to think Clara was watching, smiling, at peace. And here on Earth, in a ranch house in Wyoming, a family slept, a family born not of blood, but of choice, of courage, of love, that refused to surrender even in the darkest night. The morning sun rose over Thunder Creek Ranch, painting the hills gold and the sky crimson. A new day, a new beginning. Caleb woke to the sound of children's laughter. Sammy and Emma were already up, their voices echoing through the house as Ruth scolded them lovingly for running in the kitchen. Beside him, Maggie stirred. Morning already. Morning. She smiled, stretching. I smell pancakes. Ruth's specialty. We should get up. The children will be looking for us. But neither of them moved. They lay there, savoring the moment, the peace, the simple joy of waking up together. Maggie. Yes. Thank you. For what? For knocking on my door that night, for not giving up, for being brave enough to ask a stranger for shelter. He turned to face her. For saving my life. I think you saved mine. Maybe we saved each other. Maybe we did. From down the hall, Sammy's voice rang out. Mr. Caleb, Miss Maggie, pancakes are ready. Maggie laughed. We're being summoned. We should probably go before he comes to drag us out of bed. They rose and dressed, moving around each other with the comfortable ease of people who belong together. As they walked toward the kitchen, hand in hand, Sammy appeared in the doorway, his face sticky with syrup. There you are, Ruth, made the ones with blueberries. We're coming, sweetheart. Sammy ran ahead, his footsteps thundering on the wooden floor. Caleb paused at the threshold of the kitchen, looking at the scene before him. Ruth at the stove flipping pancakes. Emma at the table carefully pouring syrup. Sammy bouncing in his chair, unable to contain his excitement. Zeke coming in from the barn, stomping mud from his boots. His family, his home, his life. Maggie squeezed his hand. What is it? Nothing, everything. He smiled. Just taking it in. Taking what in? Happiness. I forgot what it looked like. And now... Caleb looked at his wife, and felt his heart overflow with gratitude, with love, with hope for all the years stretching ahead of them. Now I never want to forget again. They took their places at the table, joining hands for the morning blessing. Reverend Holloway had taught the children the words, and Sammy led them now, his small voice clear and confident. Thank you for this food. Thank you for this family. Thank you for this home. Amen, everyone echoed. Amen. Caleb repeated silently, adding his own prayer. Thank you for bringing them to me. Thank you for teaching me to love again. Thank you for Clara, for Lily, for all the love that led to this moment. And somewhere in the space between worlds, in the light beyond sight, a woman with golden hair smiled at her baby daughter and whispered, You see, Lily, I told you he'd be okay. I told you love would find a way. The sun climbed higher. The pancakes disappeared. The laughter continued. And in a ranch house in Wyoming, a family that had found each other against all odds sat together whole and healed and home at last. Some doors once opened change everything. Some knocks in the storm lead not to shelter, but to salvation. And some loves, the truest loves, never really die at all. They just wait patiently for us to open our hearts again.